Great. So hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. This is the Ringer Park Tree Community Meeting. It's our 5th meeting for this project. I'm Nellie Ward. I use they, them pronouns, and I took the project over from B. Chatfield in February when B went out on parental leave. So since then, I've been working with our design team to continue to finalize the construction documents for the site plan that you all helped develop and shape through the community engagement process. So I'll continue to be your point of contact going forward. I'd like to thank you for your participation in this meeting, and we know that you all have very busy schedules, and we really appreciate the time you're taking from your schedule to join us for this meeting. At this time, I'd like to welcome any elected officials. Do we have any elected officials on the call? Raise your hand, please. Annie.
Hey, so I'm not an actual elected official, but I am representing Senator Brownsberger. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. We're honored to have you. Great. Next slide, please. Great. So as I said, the meeting is being recorded, and this is partly so that it can be posted on the project webpage, which usually takes about a week. We also post the notes and the presentation slides there. So you can go ahead and pass this on to other, this link on to other community members that missed the meeting. Michael will add the link to the project webpage in the chat as well. Next slide, please. Great. So during the presentation, your microphone will be muted, and it's up to you whether you'd like to keep your video on. However, during the discussion session at the end, we encourage you to turn on your video if you feel comfortable doing so. Please be respectful of everyone's ideas. We hope everyone feels comfortable sharing their comments and questions either verbally or in the chat, but you're also welcome to reach out directly through email to me or to Michael if that would make you feel more comfortable. Next slide, please. As we go through the presentation, we do ask that questions and comments are held until the end of the presentation. If it feels pressing, you're welcome to add questions or comments to the chat throughout the course of the presentation, and we'll address those during the listening and discussion session. During that time, we'd love to hear from you, and it would be great if you felt like turning your video on. To ask a question or provide a comment, if you're joining via Zoom on the computer, use the raise hand button and we will unmute you. And if you're calling in on a phone, use *9 to raise your hand. Next slide, please. Great. So we'll start with an introduction to the project team and then look at an overview of the project, including where we're at in the project schedule. And then I will talk about the ongoing and upcoming tree removals at Ringer Park with the design team, who has a great presentation for you. Some of the removals are happening this fall and some are happening over the past couple of months, and Rob will explain more about that. We'll spend some time explaining the different types of tree removals and which specific trees need to be removed as part of this project. Then the presentation will be followed by a listening and discussion session. Next slide, please. Awesome. So once again, I'm Nellie Ward, project manager at Boston Parks. B will be getting back in the next month, and she may or may not be back involved in the project, but we'll keep you posted. We have Michael McMillan, who's moderating the meeting tonight, our wonderful community outreach coordinator. He's very connected with the Office of Neighborhood Services and various parks groups, so he's also a great contact. Jen Roberts, who may or may not be here. Jen, are you here? Feel free to raise your hand. She's our new Office of Neighborhood Service. Yay! Hi, Jen. Thanks for being here. And you're welcome to jump in at any point. She's also here just listening in. And then Frank Mendoza is also the Neighborhood Deputy Director. He's a great contact. And then our wonderful designers, Rob Barella and Joe Figliolizzi, sorry, Joe, from KZLA. They're great. They've been working on this project through and through, and they'll be presenting the removals. Next slide. Okay, project schedule. So as I said, this is the 5th community meeting that has been held for Ringer Park. As many of you know, this project has a long history that goes well off the left side of this page, but to focus on the most recent events, there were a few community meetings at the end of last year, and after that we launched into construction documents. During the construction documentation period, there was some value engineering to get the project within budget, but we finally got there, and the project actually went out to bid August 11th. So we're in the bidding period currently. So we're now at the orange dot, and we're having this meeting because during construction documentation, it became clear that there were some additional trees that needed to be removed that we had not discussed with you all before. In general, we like to have these meetings before construction begins. The City of Boston tree ordinance requires that the community is made aware of trees to be removed as a result of park improvements. This is partly what we're doing here today. While we're at it, we're also going to be talking about trees that are getting removed because they are dead, dying, or invasive. You may have seen the signs walking through the park of the trees that are being removed. This is part of our new ordinance process. The trees have flyers on them that correspond to their reason for removal, and we'll get into that a bit more later on. So looking ahead, the bid packages will be opened on Thursday, the 28th at noon. At that point, when the bids come in, we hope that they're on budget and that we can award the construction contract. If that happens, we will plan to begin construction this fall, and we hope to wrap up by next June. I will keep you posted on the bid results and the next step in the project's timeline. Next slide, please. Awesome. So for every Boston Parks project, there are 4 main components that go into park design: the City of Boston priorities, Parks and Rec goals, safety guidelines and regulations, and community input. Next slide. The City of Boston priorities are family-friendly, green and growing, healthy and safe, delivering exceptional city services, closing the racial wealth gap. Next slide, please. The Parks and Rec goals include creating accessible spaces for all. So that's thinking about users, which features are best suited to the greatest level of accessibility. Having a diverse, balanced, and efficient mix of uses, so serving as many people as interests as possible. And meaningful and inclusive and community engagement. It's important for us for the community to be involved and get engaged in the entire process. And adaptive and resilient landscapes, so designing for current and future challenges with climate change, and promoting connections between spaces and between people. And next slide, I believe I will pass it over to Rob and Joe from KZLA.
Thank you, Nellie. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for being here tonight. As Nellie mentioned, my name is Rob, and we also have Joe from our team. We are both landscape architects with Kyle Zick Landscape Architecture. We probably have met some of you in the past. As Nellie mentioned, this is our 5th community meeting for this phase of work at Ringer. And prior to that, we also worked on the Ringer Park Master Plan. So we've had a really great opportunity getting to know a lot of the neighborhood over actually the past few years. So this has been an ongoing process for us. It has been a while since we last met, but I want to start with a quick overview of the improvements in the project design. I'm happy to answer any other questions at the end of this that you might have about the design, but this is consistent with what we had shown at the 4th community meeting. And those features include adding an accessible trail in the woodlands, adding new accessible pathways throughout the park, connecting to the existing courts, which are going to be remaining, up to a new renovated fenced dog area. We have gathering space in a lot of grading to achieve accessible pathways in the center of the park through here. We have a new splash pad. We have a new enclosed playground with equipment for ages 2 to 5 and 5 to 12. And then we have a renovated open lawn area as well. So we're really improving a lot of the circulation in the site. And a big focus for tonight is of course the trees. And I will go through the reasoning for the removals. You know, as landscape architects, we don't always want to get rid of trees. There are a few different reasons for us doing so in this. And we'll break down each reason and talk about the species a little bit more. Okay, so I'll start with trees that are being removed that are either deemed as dead or in poor condition. We had a survey conducted, an inventory of all of the trees in Ringer Park, or at least not included in some of the denser parts of the woodland, but definitely along some of the more populated used areas in the park, like along pathways and the playground. And we had certified arborists come up with a inventory of these trees. They went through the species, the size, they went through the condition, and they noted any type of potential issues or things that could be declining in the health of those trees. So we have a good grasp on the condition and then any improvements we can make to help increase the longevity of the trees that we want to keep being healthy in Ringer Park. So there are 48 trees that were either deemed as dead or in poor health. And a reason that we want to address these are because, as I mentioned, they're in locations that have a lot of foot traffic. And we do want to reduce the risk of any potential harm or limbs falling or any damage. And that includes around the perimeter of the park too, where there are abutting properties. So these are the trees on the screen here that are either dead or in poor condition. There are some instances that these might be obvious, like in the playground, there's a very dead tree in there. And then some of the other areas, you know, some of these along the woodland path here, they might be nestled in with among some of the other trees there. This is some examples of what a poor or dead condition tree might look like. So there's obvious signs of damage. A lot of times, big splits or big limbs that have broken off and that need to be addressed. Sometimes the damage is at the root, the base of the tree, and could cause, you know, we're kind of anticipating what it might be in the longer term. With this project, we have a large focus on tree maintenance and care in Ringer. So now is kind of a good time to take care of some of the anticipated tree maintenance needs. And as I mentioned in the playground, there's also a tree that is dead. It is small, but it is dead. These are the signs that you will see around the park on the trees that are considered to be poor or dead condition. Also with that too, one other thing with the poor condition might be disease, and that's something that might be a little less obvious to see there, but it's something that came up with the notes from the arborist inventory. Okay, we also have some trees that are being removed because they're invasive species. The dots on the plan here, there's a few through the woodland area, but most of them are along the courts on the south side of the tennis and basketball courts. They consist of black locust and Norway maples. Something like Norway maples, we typically see them hit a age of maturity and they kind of start to fall apart, and it's a little bit problematic and can cause potential harm, and it's just kind of a mess at a certain age for them. And then something like a black locust, they spread really aggressively and they outcompete certain native species. And in a lot of cases for the trees along the courts, some are leaning pretty aggressively, some have some damage to the base, and others, it's a little bit more about the tree form and anticipating issues that might come up over time. These are some of the examples. There's a cluster in the back that you can see tied off here. These are some of the ones along the courts. You can see some of these have a real lean to them, and some of the other ones will have some damage at the base. And then there's a couple ones that are in the woodland path that are also deemed either because of their leaning or just because of some other indication that we've noticed on site. But you'll see this type of notice on the invasive species trees. Now, trees being removed for design purposes. So that's a if the tree is not in what we're considered to be poor condition or an invasive species, this is really because of a design decision. But it's worth noting that for, we'll focus on the trees here and the tree in the center here, and even along this, well, all of them. It's always because we're trying to have a minimal impact to the site, but still achieving accessible pathways. So there does have to be a lot of earthwork done to make accessible pathways through this park, just to increase access to some of these park features. There's not currently an accessible path that navigates from Gordon Street all the way through the park right now. So that's a big improvement that we were prioritizing as an essential need for this round of improvements. So some of these trees happen to be within the areas that resulted in the least amount of disturbance to be able to get that accessible path installed. And you might see on this area of the path, this is south of the courts. This is a fairly large hump in the path, and this requires some earthwork to achieve accessible grades through there. And what I mean by accessible grades too is that it's either pathways that are under 5% slope, or we also have a couple ramps that have some accessible handrails. But in order to make that happen, we do have to do some earthwork through here. And by doing that, it would compromise a couple of the trees in this pathway. You'll see the sign on those 6 trees calling out the removal for this phase. So the overview then, these are all the trees that are being removed. We do have data on what each of them are. We can, if you have any questions on any specific tree, we can talk about that more specifically. But otherwise, all of these trees will have a notice on them on site right now. They're color coded right now based on the topics we just went over. Again, it's either because they're in poor or declining condition, because it's an invasive species, and then the 6 that are for design intent with creating the accessible pathways and trying to minimize site disturbance otherwise. So there are 78 trees in total. Now that seems a little high, but a big part of this phase 2 is a lot of maintenance for the existing tree management. So we also are pruning 112 trees in the park. And that is pruning to either address certain structural issues, to maybe raise the canopy, if there's something overhanging in a way that might be damaging to the tree or whatnot. This is all preventative care that we're giving to 112 other trees in the park, in a way that was recommended by the arborists as part of their inventory, and that we're hoping will help in the longevity of the rest of the canopy in the park. In addition to pruning all of those trees, we are adding more trees. We're adding 38 new trees through here. We have a few along the path west of the courts. We have a lot more in the central area here. We have a few more in the dog park. We have a lot around the playground, which will provide a lot more shade for the playground. And then we have a few in the open lawn area as well. That's all consisting of 19 different tree species, which is a big increase in the biodiversity in the park. Here are some of the species that we are planting. We don't have to go through all of them, but we try to go for a mix of kind of aesthetic and then ecological value with some of these. So, some are taller shade trees that, especially like around the playground. In some areas, we have some evergreens, and then we have some other trees that have provide different habitat for certain species in the park. And then we also have some understory trees as well. We're also thinking about seasonal interest and really trying to have a diverse palette of new trees going in. That concluded the overview on the trees, but happy to jump back to any of those slides and explain in further detail.
Rob, could you go back to the overall removal slide? Because I had one important thing that I meant to say that I hadn't said. Thank you. I wanted to mention earlier when I was introducing this presentation, I mentioned that the tree ordinance requires that we present trees that are being removed for design purposes to the community prior to their removal. And I wanted to just point out that it's only the blue trees that fall into that category. So it's only 6 trees that we're really presenting to you for your awareness. The rest of the trees are being removed because of being dead, dying, disease, or invasive, which we don't like to remove trees in the Parks Department. We like trees a lot. However, when we do a big park improvements project, one of our processes is to give the trees attention and to address trees that have been sort of like neglected or have had, potential hazardous potential to become hazardous over time, to like review everything and to address removals while we're at it, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to clarify that there's kind of 2 main buckets, even though there's 4 here. Really, it's removal for design purposes, and then removal because of the tree condition. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I'm happy to go back to the listening and discussion slide and answer any questions that have come up. Thank you so much. Do we have any brave questions out there? Michael, would you like
Yeah,
to?
Eva.
Okay.
All right. Hi, my name is Eva. I guess I have a couple small questions. Will we have access to the arborist report? I saw I saw the slide with the like overview, but is there a more in-depth one available?
We can post that on the web page for sure, on the project web page, along with the slideshow and notes.
Awesome, thank you. And I noticed that a lot of the new trees were in areas where trees weren't being cut down, like around the playground where there aren't as many trees being cut down. So I was just wondering, will there be more in the area leading up to the like, like I don't know how to describe it, but in those areas,
Yeah,
Can-
great question.
or why not?
Rob, I'm happy to take that, or you can take it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that is a good question. Yep, and it's not something that isn't necessarily intentional. A lot of the trees that are being removed happen to be around this stretch through the middle here, and that all goes back to creating the accessible pathway through there. There's a lot of earthwork that's going on, and it creates a little bit of some tight spaces where we didn't necessarily feel like new trees would maybe thrive on some of the slope conditions over there. The areas that we're prioritizing trees are in certainly around the playground, areas that we felt like there needs to be more shade added, and then around some of the seating areas in the park as well. We also have a handful of other large shade trees that will be going in for the dog park for additional shade. So typically, and then through the woodland, there's quite a bit of canopy through there. We just kind of felt like part of the tree management is kind of opening up some of the gaps and some of the canopy through there as well. But if I jumped back to, say like the tree pruning, there's a lot that are remaining in some of this area that are still going to be pruned. So there's not really large gaps within like the central core of the park.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I should clarify. All these pink squares are trees to remain that are being
Yeah.
pruned. Yeah.
Okay, pruning being like shaped out a bit, cut down to some extent, but not completely removed.
Different for not completely removed, and the pruning is not because it's like we don't like the way it looks. It's because there's something with the tree form that if we make proactive cuts on it, it'll improve the longevity of like the form, the way the structure of the tree is growing. So sometimes it has to do with like if there's like a co-dominant leader in the tree. Sometimes if you make some cuts early on in that tree's life, it will develop healthier growing habits for the future.
Yeah, and yeah, it's less about aesthetics and more about tree health and tree function, if that makes sense. The pruning that we're doing. Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, Rob, I'm realizing it would be helpful to have a slide where you see all of the canopy, like just because there's so many trees here that when you just focus on the ones you're removing, it's hard to see the context.
There's a lot, and it's as I mentioned, it's like we're addressing all of the trees that are in the high foot traffic areas. Like we like that Ringer has a wild to it, so we're not in a lot of the dense wooded areas. These are areas that it's really high pedestrian areas, or the playground, or the dog area, like areas that is more about safety.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
We have Annie next.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. This is very exciting. I have a few questions. I have three. The first question is, do you or can you trim trees with rodent control in mind? The second question is there a tree that deters rodents? And then the third unrelated question is, this is just me thinking wildly that BCYF is right there. I was wondering if it is ever in your parks protocol to have the kids help plant a tree or two to sort of help them take ownership. Feel just more part of the project. So that's it for my questions.
Thank you, Annie. Rob, did you want to add anything?
I can start with the rodent questions.
Okay.
I'm unsure about a tree that deters rodents. I'm intrigued
Mhm.
by it, but I'm not familiar with it.
Okay.
We do come across a lot of shrub species that are either on the don't plant because it creates rodent habitat, and then but is there anything in particular that makes you ask that? Like, is there somewhere on site that would be?
Well, I mean, it's just this is where we are in Alston Brighton is that, we have rodents. And so I think that it just is a good idea to be mindful of that in as many ways as we can. Um, so just figured I'd ask that. I know that they'll burrow anywhere and, the city of Boston is already aware, like with their trash barrels and things like that, but just had a walk around with inspectional services, so it's on my mind.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing to bring up. And to your point on trash receptacles, we do have the new standard trash receptacle going into the park too. So we do have a handful of those, which should help. But certainly, there will be some habitat in the park.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Annie, I will also talk to Max Ford Diamond, the city tree warden, to see if he has any ideas for how to deter rodents with tree work. I personally don't know either. And then regarding so I'll get back to you on that. The Jackson Man BCYF Center, I am in touch with Rosie. She's been really collaborative and available for conversation with B prior to me. So we don't do those kinds of things typically, but I think it's a good idea and I'll look into it on my end.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for the questions.
Next, we have Andrew.
Hello, I just want to know how we paying for all these trees removed and putting up, because I know that I've spoken with the state rep. He had put money from the state budget to tree removal and new trees. So did you guys know that, or because you haven't mentioned anything of how much this is going to cost, where the money's coming from? Just wanted to know.
Thanks, Andrew. The tree removals fall into there's two different sources of funding. There's the Urban Forestry Department has its own funding for removals, and then we have our own budget for the capital improvements. And so some of the trees are being removed with the funding from Urban Forestry because basically, urban forestry also is constantly doing tree maintenance, and they didn't want to wait until the fall or spring to do some of the removals. They deemed them more pressing. So there are two buckets of funding that are funding the removals of these trees. But yeah, it's always something that we account for when we do a capital improvements project. We set aside money for tree pruning because it's essential to the health of the trees. And we value trees a lot at the Parks Department because they are a main natural green infrastructure system. And so we always set aside funding to ensure their longevity of their health.
Okay, but did you know that Kevin Honan put money in the budget at the state
Yep.
this year for this?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
you might want to let the rest of the people know that,
Okay. Yeah, I can look into that further.
because he did put money aside.
Yeah, I think we're good on funding for the removals for these trees. But thank you for that information.
Next, we have Brendan.
Oh, you're still muted, Ren.
Hi. I just had a few questions. The first being, how will the removal of the trees affect like the ecosystem in the park, the wildlife, and also like planting new trees? That's the first.
Sure, I can try to take a stab at that. So, I would really prefer that our city arborist gave you the answer to that question, because he's just so knowledgeable. But basically, when we do a improvements project, a lot of times we're disturbing the site anyway. So we'll be, removing paving, coming in with an excavator to like put in a wall. So there is a lot of like disruption to the site already that is more significant than the removal of the trees in most cases. The removals that we're doing are all along the areas that we are already disturbing. We're not doing a lot of removals off in the woods or in like a sensitive ecological habitat. It's all clustered around the areas that have already been impacted by human use. So we hope that the removal of trees and the pruning of trees will actually increase the health of the urban ecosystem that we have here. We hope that planting so many new trees with a vast array of species will increase the ecological integrity of the forest. Right now, we have a lot of the same types of species. And so we hope that increasing diversity creates more ecological habitat for flora and fauna. So it gives more opportunities for different types of creatures to live there, because we're increasing the types of environments that those types of trees create. Rob, did you want to jump in and say anything else on that?
Yeah, I'd like to add about the construction process a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, so two things. Just in terms of the process during construction. So, the contractor, we have requirements for who can be removing the trees. There's kind of professional standards that we're requiring of the contractor to have. So they have to have experience, or they have to, with proper tree removal. We'll also have people on site to review what is being removed to ensure that it's being removed appropriately. And then we have two ways of protecting trees that are to remain. We have two forms of protection. We have trunk protection, and then we have critical root zone protection. So areas that we can have it, we try to have the fence as far out, basically at the drip line of all existing trees, to prevent any disturbance within the critical root zone of the trees. That isn't always possible if the trees, like out right at Raynor Park, you can see it 2 feet away from a pathway. To remove that pathway, we have to be within the critical root zone. But in any area where we can stay out of the critical root zone, we are having the contractor provide fencing as a stay out of this area. Then trunk protection, all the trees within 5 feet of disturbance also have trunk protection, which is boards around the trunk of the tree to protect the tree. So there are a handful of measures in the construction process to try and protect the trees.
Yes, and there are fees associated with losing trees that weren't supposed to be lost. So we take tree protection very seriously of the existing trees to remain.
Like how long will the park be like closed while this is happening? Is there like certain areas where the trees are being removed that will be closed off?
Yeah, so while the park is under construction, like all of the the playground, the dog park,
Mhm.
everything being redone, the park will be closed anyway. So when this park, yeah, people want their park renovated, and
Yeah.
we're like, okay, no, it's closed for a year. So we do anticipate that the park will be closed sometime this fall until at least the end of June next year. So that during that time, we will do the removal of the trees along with all the other improvements. So it's not like adding time to the length of the park being closed. It'll just be kind of incorporated in. And we don't know exactly, if parts of the park will be open while other parts are closed. That's not something that we have control over at this moment, but it's possible something we might be able to work something out with the contractor, but I can't make any promises on that. But it's always on our mind to try to get the park open as fast as possible, and to make it usable to people as fast as possible.
And then my last question was just about like how shady will the park be? Because right now like there's a lot of areas that are pretty shady, but I just didn't know if with the removal of the trees, will it be a little bit more hot at the park without the shade, and like how will that be addressed if it is a little bit less shady?
We really shouldn't be creating many openings in the canopy. I
Okay.
mean, like I mentioned, there will be more of the trees that are being removed are either in the woodland, which there are plenty of trees along this accessible pathway right now, and then it's this transition south of the courts. Outside of that, I mean, this whole circular area right now, there's a lot of really mature trees all through there. All of those are to remain. Any area that like with the new playground and the dog park area and some of the seating areas, those are all having more trees added to them. So we're really focusing on not removing trees in areas that are going to create, like you say, like hot spots and make the park hotter. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ren.
We have a few questions in the message.
Okay, would you like to read them?
1 second. This is from Tom. Sorry. Were there any trees of heaven identified as part of the survey that was done? From walking through the natural path parts of Ringo Park, I noticed a lot more trees of heaven saplings popping up. I'm curious if there's anyone being done to remove those, since there weren't any trees of heaven being removed. And I know that spotting lantern fly risk of coming.
I don't think we have any tree of heaven being removed. It's less of we don't really have invasive species management in the sense of like treating a large woodland restoration per se. This is mostly for canopy trees. I have no doubt that there are trees of heaven all over the park though.
Yes, and when we do a tree assessment, we only inventory trees that are 3-inch in 3-inch caliper at diameter breast height. So if you're standing in front of the tree, how big the tree trunk is. If it's less than 3 inches, we don't do an assessment for it. So if we don't have it in the package, it's because it wasn't inventoried.
One thing to mention, and this is going to tie into a later question I see in the chat too. The inventory also had to tie to available construction budgets as well. So we kind of defined what areas of the park fit within that. So that dictated the areas that were inventoried, and that all ties again back to the high trafficked kind of right off a pathway or over the playground kind of situation for trees. So we don't have an inventory of every tree in Ringer.
Correct. Yeah, we're just focusing on the improvements area. So this was not like a thorough, robust, assessment of all trees in Ringer, and we decided to remove the ones that are most hazardous or dangerous or invasive. It was which trees, specific trees do we want to target that are in relation to the improvements that need to be removed. Next question.
Our next question is from Gwen. What are we gonna do about the Black Lotus's root system? They would just start popping back up.
Yeah, so that's the thing with black locust, right? They're super aggressive. They're an invasive species that grows really aggressively, and they do spread at the base, which is why at the courts you see like 5 trunks coming out of the same location, and then that ends up being situations where there's potential hazards where you have all these trunks coming out the same spot, and there's leaning and all that, and they grow really aggressively. It's going to be a bit of a balance because like the black locusts that are getting removed south of the courts, that area is really it's going to get regraded for the accessible pathway, and there's also a retaining wall over there to create the accessible pathway. I'd anticipate most of that root system being removed with the tree. If there's an instance where complete excavation, as you know, the root system can go out to the drip line and beyond, but if there's a situation where it encroaches and causes more harm than good and starts impacting other surrounding trees and whatnot, I think it's just being reasonable and trying to remove what we can without creating more disturbance than needed.
Yeah, and just on that subject, we don't at the Parks Department usually remove trees just because they're invasive. We, in this case, as Rob and I already mentioned, the trees that we're removing because they're invasive also relate to the scope of the improvements. So there are plenty of other invasive trees at this park that we're not touching because they are not part of this specific scope. So I just wanted to clarify that. Next question.
Jennifer.
Oh, hey, Jen.
Hi, Nellie. Thank you so much for the presentation. Rob, thank you as well. I actually just came back from, or earlier today, a walkthrough of Cleveland Circle, and it kind of informed my question. They were a couple of trees there that like planted on the outside of Cassidy Park or abutting like some MBTA properties that had gone in and people had advocated them for a long time, and now they're dying because of a couple of drought seasons. So I don't know if this is the proper venue for the questions, but just like once these trees go in, are there like mitigation efforts for maintaining them for like long enough for them to like really, add value or to the canopy or what have you?
That's a great question. Yeah, we find that if a new tree goes in, it's not watered regularly and no one's looking after it, it will die, especially if it's next to compaction or salt from road runoff. In the case with these trees, we always, for Parks Department, we try to include a 2-year warranty on the tree itself. So that means that the project manager from Parks is checking on these trees, certainly all throughout construction, but then we'll come back at 1-year and 2-year intervals to make sure that the trees are still alive. And then it's on the contractor to replace the trees if they die within that 2-year period. So I'm not sure how long, if they die after that 2-year period, there's not a whole lot that we can do aside from plan for their replacement. But we do find that proactively pruning trees yearly in parks really can help with their lifespan. And, doing root collar excavations and other types of tree maintenance can help. Obviously, water is the most important thing, but with these trees, we hope to have them for at least 2 years and replace any that are looking sickly or stressed.
Thank you, Nellie. That actually perfectly answers my question. Thank you.
Great.
And then going back to the chat, we have Andrea. She says, has the trees along Austin Street been assessed for removal or pruning?
No, we have not done the trees along Alston Street because they are not part of where the improvements are focused. So there's a whole lot of trees at Ringer Park that we're not touching because it's just not within the project budget to do all the trees in the entire park. Tree removals that are sort of outside of the scope of this work would be something that we would want to coordinate with the urban forestry department, that has a different bucket of funding for general park improvements. Sorry, for general tree maintenance. If there's any concern about a specific tree or like any kind of, hazardous condition, that is something that can be 311 and taken care of by the urban forestry department. They deem it to be so.
And then our next question will be Eva.
Hi, just one more question. So going back, when we were talking about the tree of heaven, and just the other invasive species, I was a bit confused because, are we? It seems as though we're like I go through the park and I saw quite a few dead trees and like dying trees that didn't have signs, and then I would see trees that didn't look like they were dying. And of course, I'm not an arborist, so I'm not going to necessarily know all the ins and outs of these trees. But if we're picking and choosing which of the invasive and dead and dying trees to take down, wouldn't all of those choices be design choices? Because it's all related to the design, not the longevity of the park. And shouldn't we work on taking down the invasive species that like need to go down and waiting and perhaps pushing back this project to do that so that we have the funding? Would that make sense? Because I mean, if we're having these invasive species and they're just going to grow based on what I gather. So we might have another project like this in 10 years or so where we close down the gorgeous park that we all love for a year again. And I guess that's my only thought about like design versus invasive dead.
Yeah.
How are those? Or because yeah.
I get I think I understand your question, and it is a semantics thing. So we don't have this is like one of the first tree community meetings that we've had for the Parks Department. So we don't really have the best language to sort of describe what we mean when we say trees that are being removed for design. So it's like, really, it's true. You could argue that all of these trees are being removed because, they're part of the design plans for this park improvements. That's definitely something you could argue. I think the point that what I was trying to make is that there's 6 trees that are being removed, that are not invasive, are not dead or dying, that just need to be removed because they're in the way of creating an accessible space. So there's a tree ordinance that basically says that those specific types of trees need to be reviewed by the community. So, but it's not really worth having a public meeting just to look at these 6 trees. So it's, while we're talking about it, we're also including these other removals that we're taking care of just because it's important to, be clear with the community about what's happening. But your question about, when you're walking through the park and you're seeing some trees that look dead and that don't have flowers and some that look fine that do, I could see why that would be confusing, because you don't have the invisible boundary of what we have a scope to what we're scoped to be looking at. And I think I understand your question, which is that shouldn't we just not do this project until we have all of the money to do all of the trees? But I think that would be not the best way to go, and because we would really love to deliver the park improvements as soon as possible. And we don't, as the Parks Department, we don't remove trees just because they're invasive, because they can be beneficial in terms of providing canopy or cooling qualities to the city. So we have so many invasive tree species in our urban forestry, in our urban ecology system, that if we were to try to go after them, we would be doing more harm than good. I don't know if that is a robust enough answer to your question, but I also want to just add that because we're taking care of these trees now as part of these park improvements, it doesn't mean that we're never going to come back here. This project will still be part of the Urban Forestry Division's purview as like the improvements, after the improvements get installed. Any trees that really need to be removed will be addressed by the Urban Forestry Department, just not by this capital improvements project. I also will just say that sometimes a tree can look very healthy from the outside, but then if you see inside its trunk, it's hollow and it could fall over at any second. And that's kind of, confusing if you're not, it's confusing for me. I'm not an arborist. But sometimes, that happens a lot actually, where we have an arborist or a team go out and assess and they say this tree needs to be cut down immediately. And we say, well, it looks fine. But then once you see its trunk and it's hollow, there's a lot more information that's going on. It's behind the scenes that's visible than it's visible to the average eye. Rob, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, one quick thing, because it's a great comment because, it is complex. So like, for instance, if you see dead trees off in the woodland, but it doesn't pose any risk to pedestrians, it provides habitat. And, sometimes dead wood is good to preserve in a woodland setting that is not going to pose any harm. So, if you do see a dead tree that is out there that doesn't have a removal sticker on it, I would be curious to know where. And that, like Nelly said, is like a 311 situation where they could potentially remove that. It's as far as I know, like our inventory would capture anything that we're deeming as potentially hazardous along like the pathways. And then and you mentioned a handful of things that I'll try to mention too. So like in terms of what invasive species we're selecting, if there was a tree of heaven that was 12-inch diameter next to the pathway or in the playground, like we would be removing that. We're not only choosing black locust or Norway maples. It just so happens to be two really prominent invasive species within our area. And then in terms of like the park closure, it's less because like of the tree work. So it's not like the park will be closed for a year because, just for tree work. It's just because it's tied to everything else. It's like we're gonna have one contractor that is doing the playground, the splash pad, the pathways, entrance improvements, the woodland, and the tree stuff all collectively. So it's just a lot going on for one contractor. That's more for the reason of park closure. So it's not to say like another tree phase would require the same amount of like lack of access.
Right. We could continue to pruning and some removals after this park is open. We don't have to close down the park for that. The Urban Forestry Department is always going around and doing that while the park is still open. They just might have to like close off a little area while they're working. Thanks for your questions. Who do we have next, Michael?
We have George. Is there a possibility to reduce the number of live trees removed at this point in the process?
Sorry, could you repeat that question? Is there
a possibility to reduce the number of live trees removed at this point in the process?
No, there's not. At this point in the process, we've identified the trees that need to be removed in order to build the park. And that's what we're presenting here today. If during construction, there is a discrepancy between what the plans and the survey show and what is actually in the field, and we don't have to remove a tree because it's not actually in the way, then we won't remove it. in general, we like to not remove trees as the Parks Department.
Yeah, there'll be instances to that point, like if we have a certain pathway and if we just jog it, a couple feet to the left or whatnot, and that will benefit a tree. That's even for trees that we're anticipating to remain. We will always try and make some minor field adjustments if it's going to improve the health of those trees.
Thanks, Rob. Who do we have next?
We have Wendy.
Hi. Question, you talked about the park closing and how long the construction will take. And I know this comes up with a lot of construction projects. The T went through this recently and reconstruction of streets around the bridges at BU. But my question is, you said one contractor is going to do everything, so it's going to take a long time. Is there any reason not to use multiple contractors so that it takes less time and the park is closed for less time?
I
What's
can
that?
I can start if
Oh,
you
go
want.
ahead. Yeah.
That was a comment I made. Yeah, so and it's not that one contractor necessarily slows it down. They depending on the size of the contractor, it could be a really large contractor. They're all contractors that we deem as qualified to handle this type of project, and they might have subcontractors in there as well. There's just going to be a certain means and methods for the park improvements that have to happen. So, for instance, like they might not be able to do the playground yet because the utility work's not in yet. So it's more about the means and methods for the construction of things and less about trying to get everything at one time.
Yeah, and just to clarify, what Rob said, there is a general contractor who's kind of like the project manager, and then they will hire a bunch of subcontractors. So there are going to be a bunch of different contractors that are working under one person, and we just hire the one person, the general contractor. It's actually the most efficient way to hire one general contractor that's managing all of these subcontractors because they have control over sequencing. So like having the utility guys come in and then, after that, then the hardscaping people come in. So if you had a bunch of separate contracts, if I had a bunch of separate contracts with all of those contractors, it would take a lot longer to try to coordinate all of the construction sequencing that's required to make that happen. I do understand, like, that it seems like a long time to close the park, for even 6 months. Our projects are when we close parks, it's usually 9 months to 2 years. So this project is on a way faster timeline. So we hope to have this park bid if the construction contract gets awarded. We hope to have construction wrapped up by June 2026, which is like really fast compared to other parks. I know that that's maybe not that comforting, but that in the world of construction, that's a very fast timeline. And there are lots of rules in procurement law about the way that we can award contracts and all of that. So it's not like we have a lot of choice about how if we can break this project up into a bunch of little pieces. We have to go with the lowest bidder when we bid a project. But this project, we're lucky because there's a timeline that's associated with a grant that we have for this project. So there's no choice about how long it can take. It has to take the amount of time that it has to take. So that's if that's any reassurance. We really hope that this project will be quick and that the general contractor will efficiently manage all the subcontractors.
Thank you. That's a clear explanation and it makes a lot of sense.
Thanks, Wendy.
Next up, we have Andrew.
Hi, just a few questions. When you guys start this project, a lot of my neighbors did not know about this meeting either, because you guys didn't put anything out until late this weekend. So that's the one question. And is this gonna construction impact any part of Alston Street, because we have the West End House, we have other things in the neighborhood that little kids go to. So, and we're not supposed to be having high traffic, big construction vehicles on Alston Street. So you guys might want to think about that too, if you need to use Alston Street. Because the West End's right there, and how is the noise gonna be? What time what time can you start? What time can you end?
The hours that we allow contractors to work are 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., I believe. And that's Monday through Friday, so it's not like it's happening on the weekend unless there's a special approval. I'm not sure which entrance is our construction entrance. Rob, do you know off the top of your head?
It's it's just off the page here. I'm wondering if we have
On Webley?
it's on Webley is what we're anticipating. It's very unlikely that Alston would have any construction vehicles really,
Right.
because there's not much scope going on over there. It's mostly to create that accessible pathway, and that's not a large equipment kind of scope. Most of it is going to be off of Webley in the northwest corner up here.
Oh, I just want to have and say something else. Our senior center is closing for 6 to 12 months. A lot of the seniors might have to go to the BYF center to use that. So you guys might want to be careful about that too, that there's going to be a lot more people in the area, senior citizens, blind, other things, and the BYF center's there. So you might want to consider that too.
Yeah, and I can say too, like we don't allow any stockpile materials to be outside of the park, so it's not like going to be occupying any space outside of the park perimeter.
But just driving through that area, those are tight streets. So,
Yeah.
and there's gonna be seniors that can't see, can't hear. And we don't, and they need to be careful about that too.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure we're coordinated with BCYF.
And the senior center's closing too, and they might have to go to the Jackson Man area too, so just be careful
Mhm.
about that.
Yep, thank you. It's a good point. Was there any other questions that you had, Andrew, that we didn't address? The time, the vehicles, the access? Can't
The
remember.
noise, because a lot of the people in the neighborhood work night shift too, so you guys want to be careful about that. We got a lot of students, a lot of people in bands that work nights, so you
Yeah,
might,
so
you
just
might
the
want to
regular,
and you might want to let people know when this is starting and all that, because a lot of people didn't know about this meeting.
oh, that was your question. Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't know about this meeting, if there needs to be another meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are not telling people anything 2 weeks in advance. You're telling people like the weekend that it's happening. There could have been a lot more people on this if you told us weeks ago.
So I'm happy to, if anybody has like email addresses that of people that didn't get the message, I would love to add them to my contact list so that I can, help them get updated. The trees were flyered in the park about 3 weeks ago, so
And a
that's
lot of people have been away all summer, so this wasn't a great time
Yeah.
to have that meeting.
so and the flyers were sent out 2 weeks ago, and also
I didn't get,
posted in
I'm
the
on
park.
all the emails. I didn't get anything.
I'd be happy to, why don't I grab your email? I'd be happy to send you that if you'd like.
You guys have my email. You just sent me something yesterday about this meeting.
Yep, sent a reminder email.
And I didn't get anything 3 weeks ago, nothing.
I
Okay, well-
apologize for that, Rob, and I'll follow Andrew, and I'll follow up with you.
Great, thank you, Michael. Yeah, if you have any other contacts that didn't get the message, we would be happy to add them. It's something that we would love to reach as many people as
And
possible.
a lot of my neighbors don't have computers to do this online. So you gotta realize
Yeah.
there's a lot of seniors in this neighborhood too that
Mhm.
want to be here that can't.
So just so you know, and you can let them know too, when we do start construction, we'll put flyers up around the park at the entrances 2 weeks prior.
You might want to send things out to neighbors or flyer the neighborhood too. Because a lot of these seniors don't go up to the park Because it's
Thank
not.
you, Andrew. I will make sure the flyer in the community. I would make sure I will flyer the BCYF centers and make sure that the most vulnerable population, the seniors, are accommodated to make this meeting.
And maybe you want to let Andrew Howard at the Weston House have some flyers too, let them know what's going on.
I
'Cause a lot of
appreciate
them
that. Will
walk
do.
through
Yeah,
that
that's a good
area
idea.
and all that.
Okay.
Great, thank you so much. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Ren, I think Rob touched on it a little bit. How would the construction tree removal affect people who live in the area? Would it get very noisy? Would streets or sidewalks be blocked off?
So the tree removals will be baked into the rest of the park construction. So it will be hard for you to tell what noise is coming from what, if that makes sense. We do not plan to close perimeter streets at this point. The only place we plan to close is the interior of the park that's in this roughly in this outline area. It won't be like significantly noisier to do tree removals than it is for our typical construction practices when we do park improvements. Rob, did I catch everything? Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think, I mean, yes, there will be construction vehicles having to enter the site, but, after that, they'll have all their stockpile and materials within the perimeter of the limit of work area.
And the contractor is still subject to like the city of Boston's general noise ordinance. So if the noise is above a certain decibel, we would stop work. Yeah. Thank you. Do we have any more questions out there? Well, if I missed anything, please speak up. Michael, did I miss anything in the chat?
We have a few comments from George. I wonder if the people who have been involved in the community input meetings in the past few years were contacted. I don't see some of the usual people. We have Gwen. Can you guys add me to the email list, please?
Perfect.
Sharing your email. Make
Yep.
sure you contact list, and that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Yes, the people who were part of this project previously were contacted. This email list that we used for this is the same email list that's been building over the past 4 community meetings. So those folks who we had their email did receive the notification. And then we also have notifications in the park itself for people who aren't really big emailers. But I'll be sure to add any additional emails that would like to have more contact with us. Awesome. Well, if that's it, we will conclude the meeting. And again, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, concerns, follow-up thoughts that you've had about this. I'm happy to answer questions. And connect you with other people like the city tree warden if needed, etc. Great, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your night.